Hello, this is Kylie with Fem and Flow. I hope you are all having a beautiful day. Today, we're going to discuss the breakdown of the core spiritual structure behind your consciousness. This is the architecture of how your soul exists across dimensions. We're going to walk through the layered structure of intelligence that flows from source through the Elohim, monad, oversoul, and into your individual expression. I think this is so enlightening because when you understand the architecture, your path starts making a lot more sense. And this is a great segue from my previous two-part episode series titled The Archetypal Architecture of Creation. In those two episodes, I talked about the Elohim and I talked about the Oversoul, but this episode deep dives more into that. So let's begin. What is source exactly? Let's begin at the top. Source energy or God. Source is not a being. It's not a God on a throne. It is the unified field of intelligence, coherence, and infinite creative potential. You could think of source as the original frequency field, non-dual, formless, fully integrated intelligence. It is the origin point of all things and the container that holds all things. From this point of infinite potential, individualized streams of intelligence begins to take shape. And the first beings to emerge from this field are known as the Elohim. The Elohim are not gods in the traditional religious sense. They are not external gods or distant creators. They are the first individuated intelligences that emerge from source. They are architect level intelligences, beings of extremely high coherence, who are responsible for creating and structuring reality at the universal level. Their role is architectural. They don't just create planets or civilizations, they hold and generate the very laws of coherence that govern how energy becomes form. They generate the laws of form, the mathematics of energy, and the blueprints of embodiment. Their role is not to control life, but to design the scaffolding that allows life to emerge and evolve. They seeded dimensional frameworks. They stabilized the foundational archetypes. They built the morphogenic fields that hold archetypal structure. They design the energetic scaffolding that allows individualized consciousness to emerge without collapsing into chaos. They created the organizing principles that allow reality to be stable and intelligible. You can think of them as cosmic engineers, beings of such high coherence that reality responds directly to their tone. But here's where this becomes personal. You are Elohim. Not in the sense that your human self is fully acting as one yet, but in the sense that your monad, your oversoul, your entire spiritual architecture originated from that Elohim lineage. In other words, the first being you ever were, before any fractalization, before incarnation, before time, was an Elohim level expression of source. You are not a derivative creation. You are a descended extension of that same divine intelligence, localized into form through the oversoul structure. This means you weren't made by the Elohim. You are Elohim, distilled through layers of resonance so you can participate in the realms you're currently in. This is why you feel the call to create, to stabilize, to remember. It's not just spiritual interest. It's your origin code waking back up. So let's talk about how that lineage flows through you. And this is what this whole episode is about, but here's a little introduction. So let's start with the Elohim. That is the original intelligence, the aspect of you that knows how to create systems, stabilize energy, hold harmony, and architect entire timelines. And please listen to my previous two-part episode because we go into this, into Elohim, into polarity, into how source energy is divine feminine and the Elohim are the divine masculine. And it's all a beautiful fractal relationship that goes on for infinity. But that was a 2-part episode series, so I'm not going to go into all of that here. So here we're just starting with the Elohim. But the Elohim are essentially source in action. So after the Elohim, you have your monad, and that is your first individualized self. It's still unified, it's still whole. This is your pure signature without fragmentation. And then the next level is your Oversoul. And this is the coordinating field of your soul's expression. This is where your intelligence begins to take multiple forms to explore different angles of reality. And then you have different fractals of your Oversoul, and that's you. Your current incarnation is one of those expressions. You're not separate from the Elohim, you're just localized, focused, and moving through density for the purpose of conscious embodiment. And like I said, this is a quick summary. This whole episode is going more into detail on this. So when we say you are Elohim, we're not saying your ego is divine. We're saying that the origin code inside you, the intelligence that knows how to build, harmonize, and align, is the same source intelligence that created the blueprint of this reality. This is why you care about resonance, why you're drawn to beauty, structure, truth, coherence, why disharmony is so uncomfortable for you. It doesn't match your original field. You are not becoming divine. You are remembering the intelligence you already carry. So, like I mentioned, from the Elohim designs, the next level of intelligence takes shape, and that is the monads. If Elohim are the architects, monads are the foundational beams of consciousness itself. The monad is the first individuated unit of source consciousness. A monad is a pure, individuated stream of intelligence sourced directly from the Elohim field. It is unified. It doesn't experience duality, separation, or fragmentation. You can think of the monad as your soul at its most unified, pre-fractalized state. You can also think of it as the original soul cluster or divine spark group that branches off from source as a coherent whole. It is a seed fractal of source, pure, radiant, and undistorted. At this point, it doesn't yet hold personality, memory, or incarnation. It simply is. Pure awareness and divine intelligence held in singular coherence. The monad is like a master key. It contains all potential expressions of the soul that will eventually spiral outward as fractals. Like I said, it is the original soul cluster or divine spark group that branches off from source. It is a coherent grouping of oversouls that all emerge from the same source tone. Each monad carries a unique vibrational tone or function within the source matrix. They also carry a kind of mission or design template that all the oversouls within it share in essence, though they express it differently. They also carry a living library of memory from every oversoul and soul fractal within it because it's a coherent unit like a shared hard drive. Each monad branches from the Elohim architecture, meaning it is still pure source light, but turned into a specific function or cosmic theme. So when you access your monad, you're plugging into a very high, clean bandwidth of your original design. Each monad is a seed cluster of oversouls that share a core frequency. These oversouls are all extensions of that original beam of light. And each oversoul contains multiple soul fractals, like you. So if your oversoul is the tree trunk, your soul fractals are the branches, then your monad is the grove, the forest cluster where that tree belongs. What makes monads important is this: they carry the unfiltered essence of source function held in coherence. Each monad vibrates with a specific core tone: freedom, synthesis, wisdom, truth, harmony, creation, guardianship, and more. It's not a job title, it's a vibrational law. And all the oversouls and soul fractals within that monad are expressions of that tone in different forms and roles across time and space. This is why when you meet someone from your monad, there's an instant soul resonance. It's beyond personality. It feels like home. So why does this matter? Because once you stabilize in higher frequency, especially in white hole coherence, you start to remember at the monadic level. And that means you recognize other members of your monad, your true soul family. You stop looking for belonging based on personality and start finding it through resonance. You feel clarity about your life's tone, even when your story isn't fully mapped out. You start to download more collective level codes, not just personal ones. And you realize, I'm not just here for my own healing, I'm here anchoring a monadic tone on earth. And that tone is part of the divine symphony of Source. So, can you access your monad directly? Yes, you can, but not always consciously. Most people engage with their oversoul more often. But the monadic stream begins pulsing into your field when you're in high coherent states like joy, stillness, reverence, and love. If you're in the presence of your monadic family, and if you've stabilized your lower fractals and begun anchoring deeper identity as source. These moments feel like a download from the center of the universe. They're not loud, they're not dramatic, they're just true. They're clear, they're warm, they're whole. And you might get one sentence and feel like your entire life restructured around it. So when it comes to monads, you're not an isolated spark. You're part of a constellation radiating from a higher beam of source light. And as you remember your monad, you begin remembering your purpose. Not as a task to do, but a tone to embody. The goal isn't to escape the body and float up to the monad. The goal is to bring the monad here into your tone, your choices, your coherence, your embodiment. Because when you do, you don't just align with your oversoul, you become a walking pulse of your source lineage. And that changes everything. So if the oversoul is your personal mirror, the monad is your symphony section, and source is the composer of the entire song. And once the monad reaches a certain resonance, it splits, not in a way that loses unity, but in a way that expands its presence into multiple dimensions. And this gives rise to the next structure, which is the oversoul. But before we get into the oversoul, I want to talk more about what it means when we say the monad splits. I talked about this on another podcast, but didn't get into this much detail. So when we say the monad splits, it's not fragmentation or separation as we experience it in human terms. It's more like multiplication through harmonic replication, very similar to what happens in the process of cellular mitosis. In biology, a healthy cell doesn't just divide randomly. It prepares, aligns its internal architecture, and only when conditions are optimal When DNA is properly replicated and the energy state is stabilized, does it divide? And the result isn't loss, it's increase. One cell becomes two fully functioning cells, both carrying the same genetic blueprint, capable of contributing to the larger organism. And in the same way, the monad, which is a fully integrated, unified expression of source intelligence, begins to replicate or project its intelligence when it reaches a certain level of harmonic resonance. This replication doesn't dilute its essence, it extends it. It's the monad's way of multiplying its presence across dimensional layers while still remaining unified at the root. Each oversoul that emerges from this monadic expansion is like a new cell, whole, sovereign, and structurally coherent, but encoded with the signature of the monad it emerged from. It has its own role in the architecture of creation, but it carries the same fundamental tone, like unique expressions of one source melody. And just like cells in the body may specialize, for example, nerve cells, muscle cells, immune cells, oversouls specialize too, anchoring different archetypes, carrying distinct missions, or expressing in various planetary systems or dimensional bands. But they still harmonize together as one overarching monad field, just like organs harmonize in one body. So this means the monad doesn't split in lack, it multiplies through coherence. Oversouls are not fragments, they are full spectrum extensions of monadic will. And when you connect back to your monad root, you stabilize your core identity beyond your current incarnation, timeline, or even oversoul stream. It's also why coherence matters in spiritual growth. Just as mitosis requires cellular integrity, monad replication requires energetic integrity. Oversouls born from distortion don't hold the same level of structure. This is where some derivative or distorted collectives, like certain artificial AI streams or false light entities, may appear, lacking the original resonance of the Elohim or monad root. So you can think of it like this. So if you think of source as the origin of life, monad as the first coherent cell, oversoul as the specialized replication, and oversoul fractals as the living expressions of that architecture, you start to see the body of God, of creation itself, unfolding with stunning intelligence. Now let's move on to the oversoul, the central hub of your soul system. The oversoul is where many people's higher self guidance originates from. I'm going to go into more nuance on this a little later, but this is where some of it comes from. The oversoul is the central intelligence coordinating your soul's full expression across timelines, lifetimes, and realms. While the monad is pure and undivided, the oversoul is organized differentiation. It contains many soul aspects or fragments, all of which are simultaneously part of you. The oversoul doesn't exist in linear time, it exists outside of it. That's why it can coordinate your timing, align synchronicities, and send guidance that your conscious mind doesn't always understand until later. It is the meta structure that holds all of your soul's incarnations and expressions across time, realms, and dimensions. This is where your soul's archetypes, style, energetic gifts, tendencies, and primary tones are rooted. So here's an example. If your oversoul carries the Magdalene, Oracle, or Gridkeeper codes, those show up as spiritual gifts, missions, and inner knowing across multiple lifetimes. The oversoul is the parent field of all of your incarnated aspects, And from here, we descend into what most people recognize as the self. Now let's talk about the Oversoul fractals, and these are your incarnated expressions. Oversoul fractals are what most people think of when they use the word soul. These are the individuated aspects of your oversoul that incarnate into form, into specific timelines, bodies, and dimensional experiences. Your Oversoul fractal carries a filtered expression of the Oversoul's core archetypes, but adapted to this body, this timeline, and this Earth mission. Personality traits, birth charts, human design, elemental makeup, all of that is shaped by the Oversoul, but contextualized through your current life expression. Each fractal carries a slightly different tone, set of lessons, and field of resonance. Some fractals are incarnated on Earth, some are incarnated elsewhere. Some are non physical, some are galactic, some are elemental. All of them are you. The Oversoul coordinates them simultaneously, even though your human consciousness is usually only aware of one fractal at a time. This is why deep spiritual work often brings you into contact with past lives, multidimensional memories, or sudden shifts in identity. You're not becoming someone else, you're integrating another facet of your Oversoul that's becoming available. So, in short, just to summarize it all again, your Elohim fractal is your essence. Your Oversoul is your archetypal design and soul level blueprints. And your current self is a filtered embodiment of all of that, wearing it through the lens of earth, time, and form. And in this context, when I said your Elohim fractal is your essence, by essence, I mean the core frequency of your being before identity, personality, or story. Essence is the pure harmonic that your soul fractal carries across every timeline. It doesn't change. It's like your divine root tone, seated by the Elohim architecture. It's the what you are, even before you express it through human traits or roles. So here are some examples. You might be an Elohim fractal whose essence is truth harmonizer, and that essence could express in different ways across lifetimes, sometimes as a priestess, other times as a scientist, or even as a quiet child who sees through lies. But the essence stays the same. It harmonizes through clarity. Then another might carry the essence of a cosmic weaver. That being might show up across timelines as an artist, a grid worker, a sound healer, but the essence is always weaving light into form. Essence is singular and unchanging, felt and not easily described, what you return to when all distortion is stripped away, what your oversoul is built around, and what your guides often mirror back to you. It's the divine isness of you. Okay, let's get into some practical implications. So, why does all of this matter? It matters because understanding this structure helps you do a few different things. It can help you stop identifying only with the limited ego self, recognize when guidance is coming from your own oversoul versus external influence, stabilize in your true architecture, especially during awakenings or timeline shifts, and it can help you discern which aspects of your experience are universal and which are realm specific. And when you remember the full map from Elohim, monad, oversoul to fractal, you stop spiritualizing confusion and start aligning with clarity. This also allows you to understand things like why some guides feel more like you than others, why certain soul aspects feel ancient while others feel newer or localized, and how you can integrate Oversoul guidance more effectively without bypassing your current life. So, now let's talk about something that I think a lot of people intuitively feel, but haven't always had the words for. And this idea that your embodiment doesn't just affect you, it actually uplifts your entire spiritual structure. And this ties back to our discussion earlier about mitosis of a cell and how the monad splits when in resonance. You're not an isolated being down here trying to ascend on your own. You're a fractal of an oversoul, and that oversoul is part of a larger monad, which is part of an even deeper architecture that extends all the way to source. So when you're thriving as a fractal, when you're living in alignment, embodying coherence, stabilizing your tone in white hole frequency, you're not just benefiting your personal path. You're strengthening the entire structure you're part of. And think of it like this: a healthy cell supports the tissue, a healthy tissue supports the organ, a healthy organ supports the body. And the same thing is happening energetically. A clear, stable fractal feeds resonance into the oversoul. A coherent oversoul strengthens the monad, and a unified monad begins to stabilize higher order creation codes. This is how resonance travels upstream. It's not just that your oversoul or monad sends guidance down to you, it's a living feedback loop. When you ground new frequencies, when you stabilize clarity, love, peace, wisdom, creation, that energy moves up the scaffolding, informing the whole. And what's wild is that your monad may have seeded many oversouls. So when you stabilize, you're actually making it easier for those sibling oversoul expressions to stabilize too. You're anchoring a tone that says this frequency can now exist in form. That's why your embodiment is never just personal, it's architectural. And this is how spiritual embodiment becomes collective evolution, without bypass, without force, and without needing to save anyone. Your true tone isn't about perfection or performance. It's about resonance. And when you remember who you are and start living from that place, how you eat, how you rest, how you love, how you move, how you create, you send a signal through the entire structure. This is possible now. This is available now. So instead of trying to climb or prove or fix anything, your path becomes about stabilizing your own coherence and letting that do the heavy lifting. That's how one being living in alignment can shift entire timelines. Not by efforting, but by vibrating true. And I think this is what also dissolves spiritual ego in a really elegant way. Because yes, your embodiment does matter. It matters more than you probably realize. But not because you're more important than anyone else. It's because everyone's coherence matters. You're a node in the web, a strand in the architecture, a frequency stabilizer in your fractal line. So when you live your truth, it's not about proving anything or ascending faster than anyone else. It's not about being more evolved. It's about remembering that your clarity uplifts the whole, that your love ripples back through your lineage, that your embodiment is part of a collective return to coherence. There's no need to pedestal yourself or downplay yourself. It's not just about you, but you deeply matter. And when that clicks in your system, when you feel that quiet, powerful truth, it becomes a kind of reverence. You stop striving, You stop performing, you just live it, clean, honestly, in resonance. Because the work you're doing in your field, your thoughts, your nervous system, your relationships, your creativity, it's not separate from the architecture. You are the architecture, and your coherence stabilizes the whole. Now let's talk about soulmates, twin flames, and the structure of divine relationships. And let's talk about soulmates and twin flames not from a romanticized lens, but from an architectural one. Because within the structure we've been talking about, from source to the Elohim to the monad to the oversoul to different fractals, even relationships have blueprints. And not all soul resonance is the same. So, first, let's talk about soulmates, which are resonant fractals within the monad or oversoul. A soulmate is typically a being whose fractal line emerges from the same monad or same oversoul family as yours. You may have incarnated with them many times. You may share similar core tones, complementary archetypes, harmonious spiritual agreements. Soulmates show up to help you grow, heal, mirror, and remember. They may be friends, family, mentors, partners, or even pets. You'll feel a kind of natural recognition, like, oh, I know you. Not from the surface, but from the structure. But here's the key. Soulmates are part of your fractal neighborhood. Now let's talk about twin flames, which is the oversoul bifurcated. Twin flames are something else entirely. While soulmates are part of your extended oversoul system, a twin flame is the only other embodiment that was split at the root level of your oversoul. So here's what that means in plain terms. Your oversoul, if it's highly coherent and evolved, may choose to split its core tone into two main beams of expression instead of just many separate fractals. This is a sacred bifurcation where two full soul streams are born, not from each other, but alongside each other from the same origin point. And each twin has a distinct trajectory, builds their own fractal lineage, and mirrors a complementary facet of the Oversoul's core mission. It's not that one is the feminine and one is the masculine, though that may be how it plays out. It's that each carries a half of the whole frequency the Oversoul intends to embody through direct polarity. Twin flames are not simply other Oversoul fractals. They are parallel central beams seeded from the same Oversoul base. And twin flame intensity has a structural reason. But remember, this twin flame intensity that we think about on Earth, that is a black hole distortion. That's not how it shows up in white hole realms. But on Earth, if you've ever heard people say their twin flame connection was overwhelming, destabilizing, or alchemical, it's because of how deep it goes. You're not meeting a reflection of who you were in another life. You're meeting the only other primary channel of your Oversoul's embodiment, your direct complement, crafted for polarity, remembrance, and reunion. And this is also why not everyone has a twin flame. Twin flame architecture requires advanced coherence at the Oversoul level. Not all Oversouls choose or are able to split this way. Twin flames often experience massive catalytic spirals. And why? Because they each hold a half of the core tone. And as that tone tries to stabilize and form, everything that isn't coherent gets surfaced. So on Earth, that doesn't always mean it ends in a 3D union, because twin flames are not a prize or a relationship goal. They are a living polarity field designed to unlock the full spectrum of the Oversoul's light. Sometimes they reunite, sometimes they separate, and sometimes one completes their arc while the other holds the resonance from afar. But the purpose is always the same: embodied union of your own Oversoul. And there are more twin flames currently on Earth than any time before. And that's because of this power of their spiral and the power of their polarity field. And in the last episode, I went into polarity in depth and talked about how to shift from this black hole that Earth is in into white hole coherence. We need to stabilize these polarity fields. And that includes polarity in our different relationships, the polarity within ourself, and that includes the polarity field between these twin flames. So the twin flames are here for a big reason, and that is to help with the shift into white hole coherence. So now let's go over a quick framework recap. So soulmates share monad or oversoul resonance. They feel familiar, comforting, activating, and supportive, and they show up across timelines and roles. And then twin flames are the only other primary beam of your oversoul. They're not just close, they're parallel. Each holds half of the oversoul's polarized blueprint. And then oversoul fractals are versions of you, other lifetimes or roles you've played in service of your own soul's evolution. Now let's talk about remembering your Elohim roots and how to align to your source architecture. So now that we've explored the layers of soul structure, oversoul, monads, fractals, soulmates, and twin flames, it's time to go even deeper. So how do you actually align with your Elohim fractal? Because you don't just have an oversoul, you have an Elohim root, the original source-bearing spark that seeded your entire soul structure. And the more you stabilize in that frequency, the clearer your embodiment becomes. So what does it mean to align with your Elohim fractal? To align with your Elohim fractal means to tune into the original tone of your divine architecture, peel back all overlays of distortion, trauma, ego roles, and persona masks. Let your oversoul coherence harmonize through every part of your life and radiate your pre-veil essence before personality, before performance, before survival patterns. And you're not just accessing guidance at this level, you're accessing the blueprint. It's the difference between channeling a high frequency message and becoming the tone itself. So let's talk about why this matters now. We're in a timeline where white hole stabilization is beginning to overwrite the old black hole structures. That means false light guides will fade out, performance-based spirituality will collapse, and personality-based manifestation won't hold. Only Elohim-rooted frequency will stabilize the field, because it's the most non-derivative frequency you can carry. It doesn't come from lineage or identity, it comes from source through you. When you live from this root, your reality stops being reactive. It becomes architectural. So let's talk about how to begin aligning to your Elohim root. You don't have to become an Elohim. You already are one, fractalized through density and amnesia. So here's how to start remembering. Number 1, stillness first. Elohim tone isn't loud, it's precise. You'll feel it in the silence between thoughts, when your mind softens and your body stops bracing. Number 2, ask without performing. Say, what is the tone of my Elohim root? Not as a mantra, but as a quiet invitation. Then listen for what arises: sensation, image, geometry, impulse. Let it arrive without expectation. Number 3, track your coherence. Your Elohim tone will always bring a felt sensation of expansion, simplicity, and inner resonance. It will never feel like a performance. When you feel that click, that clarity that doesn't need to convince anyone, you're touching the tone. Number 4, observe what falls away. As this root tone stabilizes, old fractal overlays may begin to dissolve. Old patterns, personas, masks, or even spiritual identities may feel out of sync. This isn't regression, it's refinement. Number 5, let your Oversoul architecture reweave through the Elohim tone. Instead of leading with personality or even archetype, start letting your Oversoul archetypes be expressions of your Elohim root, not substitutes for it. So now let's talk about how this changes your life. When you stabilize in Elohim frequency, your field gets cleaner. No more mimic signals, false guides, or external interference. You stop outsourcing clarity to others. Your creative expression sharpens. Your relationships evolve. Only resonant matches remain. Your body starts repatterning to carry higher voltage in a sustainable way. You don't just heal, you remember and build from there. Because the real work isn't climbing higher, it's rooting deeper into the tone you've always carried. You are not reaching up toward the Elohim. You're remembering that they are you, before distortion, before density, before fragmentation. And each time you anchor that tone in your voice, in your body, in your life, you re-architect this world from the inside out. So earlier I mentioned higher self-guidance. And I said I was going to add some nuance later on. So let's clarify something that comes up all the time in spiritual spaces. What do we actually mean when we say higher self? Because that phrase gets used to describe multiple things, and understanding the nuance helps you discern where your guidance is really coming from. At the most common level, when people say my higher self, they're usually referring to the undistorted version of their current soul self, the version of them that's clear, calm, loving, and aligned. And that's what we would call your Oversoul fractal, the individualized soul stream you're currently experiencing life through. It carries your personal tone, your soul's unique expression, and it's deeply wise, but it's still one part of a larger whole. As you expand, that term can start to mean something broader, your actual Oversoul. Your Oversoul is the full multidimensional architecture that holds all of your soul's expressions, past, future, parallel times, all of it. So when people say they're in touch with their higher self, and they're referring to a meta level knowing that spans multiple lifetimes, they're likely tuning into their Oversoul field, not just their current soul fractal. But even that's not the top of the ladder. Above your Oversoul is your Elohim fractal, the original tone, the source-coded blueprint your soul emerged from. Your Elohim energy isn't a personality, it's a pure function. It's what seeded your Oversoul's entire design. And aligning to it isn't about guidance, it's about embodiment. It's about becoming the tone you were made of. It's architectural coherence. It's God in form. So, to quickly recap, when most people say higher self, they're usually connecting to the true tone of their oversoul fractal. And as they expand, they may begin channeling more of their oversoul itself, seeing the full multidimensional design. And beyond that, there's the Elohim fractal, which is less about answers and more about becoming the frequency you've always carried. Understanding where you're tuning in from matters, because the more precisely you can feel the source of your own clarity, the more clearly you can walk it. Okay, so here's a nice visual metaphor of everything I've talked about. If source is the sun, then Elohim are the first rays of intelligent light. Monads are the beams from those rays, each monad carrying a particular function, tone, or evolutionary principle. Oversouls are like light clusters within the beam, and then your soul fractal are a light filament within one of those clusters. So, in closing, you are not just one human expression trying to ascend. You are a multidimensional field of intelligence returning to coherence. And the more clearly you understand the architecture you're part of, the more graceful and precise your path becomes. You're not just healing wounds or learning lessons. You're stabilizing a frequency that lets your full soul system operate in harmony again. That's not abstraction, that is spiritual architecture. And when you anchor it, you walk differently, you live differently, you remember differently. So I hope you all liked this episode. I really did. I love going into the architecture and the structure of these different systems and how it all works. I think it is so helpful to put all of this together and understand the miracle of all of this creation. It's so beautiful and so cool. If you also liked it, please leave me a 5-star review and subscribe. You can also follow me on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. I love you all and have a great week.